Can the lines on our hands show us if we are going to serve time in prison? This week, we're looking at the hands of Mike Tyson. Now, the heavyweight boxer has obviously been in the news recently and in sports entertainment, with him entering the ring once again at the age of, is he 58? I think he's 58. And we all know how that went. That's a very recent event, so we're not going to be talking about that. It's more a look at the past and a possibility of the future. And he has served time in prison before, and he filed for bankruptcy. So what's in store for Mike Tyson? What do his hands show, and how can palmistry kind of reveal information about a person's personality and their traits? And what does it say here in regards to a heavyweight championship boxer? So I've got here this image, which is, it's quite a nice image. I've got fairly good clarity with the right and the left hand. And, initially, I still do find something uncomfortable about these hands. And that's because of the way this person was raised, or a lack of parental guidance, I should say. There's certainly there's signs for a lacking of guidance when young, those crucial years where we're developing and beginning to understand ourselves and the world around us, our sense of right and wrong, those crucial lessons, and understanding by having two parents who love each other as, a role model, and really, we learn by those around us. If we haven't got them, and if we haven't been provided with the necessary emotional tools, then it leaves us stumped and underdeveloped psychologically and emotionally. And that's what I see here in the shape of the fingers. So I'm just talking about the chirognomy aspect here. Now notice how the fingers kind of throw themselves all towards Jupiter. And Jupiter itself throws itself towards the thumb, and the thumb is turned in. It's sort of um, kind of parked. It's unfree. It's sort of trapped here. So there's a few things wrong here. There's a lot of work this person needs to carry out on themselves in order to find peace. The right hand displays similar things, but not quite as extreme. And this shows us that he's developed and worked through it, because the left hand shows us what's internal and the right hand shows us the external. Pyro would have said that the left hand shows us what we're given and the right hand shows what we've made of it. And there's certainly truth to this. But the left hand displaying only the past and the right the future is not quite true. They both display past and future and present circumstances, but certainly the left is internal, the right is external. So when we see more alignment in terms of the fingers and their development and the way they kind of sprout out of the hand, then we certainly see that he's worked through some of these issues. There's more um, the psychological and emotional healing. So this is really a testament to himself. He's obviously worked through some of the things, but there are still significant issues. And part of the reason why I say it is because Jupiter is still turned in towards the thumb, and the thumb is still, there's a lacking of free will when we see thumbs that very naturally kind of lean in fingers like in images like this. It's an unconscious sign that his will, his determination and drive is, there's a blockage there. I did a palm reading for someone quite some time back, and it was entitled something about what do our thumbs show us in palmistry. So I'll put that in the description. And essentially, when we are someone else is governing our lifestyle or acting on our behalf in our interests, because we're such a liability, it can make us feel as though we're lacking freedom. And that's what I see here. So this is either an agent, it's a coach, it's family members, it's a partner, it's a combination of all of the above. It's probation officers. It's those who are above us in some sort of authority, who are acting in our best interest, and it's preventing us from feeling as though we are fully free, fully able to enact our will, because the tip of the thumb, it represents will, and the second is logic. And you can see by the lengths of both here, What I was actually expecting to see is a greater amount of will than logic. Someone who does the pushing rather than being pushed around. This is actually someone with more ideas than I would have thought, more logic than I would have assumed. And time again, palmistry teaches us not to assume. The Jupiter finger is all about the self and ambition and ego and authority and judgment, decision making. And when we see it leaning towards the thumb, it's showing us that the sense of the self is relying on determination and drive and personality, because the thumb represents the personality as a whole. The thumb represents all four fingers in a sense. So this person's decision making, their authority, their pride and ego and judgment are all kind of leaning towards this person's sort of charisma and their overall will. And if there's a blockage here, then we have a problem. It's not healthy. Now, initially, when I looked at this image, I thought, I don't like this. The Apollo finger is much longer than the Saturn finger. And then I thought, well, actually, hang on a minute. This is just a kind of a relaxed image. It's not quite a true reflection of the lengths of the fingers. So I do have here a palm print of his hand, and you can see in a lot more detail what's going on. And there is a lot going on. The first thing I noticed straight away is, actually the same thing I see here, a very dramatically low set thumb. And this is a clear indication of child abuse, of an absolute lack of, emotional nourishment when young. In those crucial years, this person was abandoned. And that's highly unfortunate. You often see a dramatically low set Mercury finger, little finger, where you also see a dramatic gap between Jupiter and Saturn. The gap here displays a lacking of a father figure. This dramatically sort of reduced, lowered Mercury finger, because it's not a terribly short Mercury finger, although it is a very low set, it shows an inability to express the deeper and more complex emotional, that emotional complexity. And when we have an inability to express our feelings, we have, again, another blockage. And so the coping mechanisms for that are quite often, um, you know, rage, outbursts, and anger management issues. Sometimes um, these are coped by, mechanisms of unhealthy sexual expression. Some might look towards seeking um, love in unhealthy ways and combining and with a lack of understanding about what they're doing and why, through attention from sex workers or um, sex, drugs, alcohol, or even sexually abusing others or physically abusing others, as a form of release, as a form of coping with these deeper rooted, um, embedded kind of psychological issues. And that's really what I see here. There's certainly signs of it here. The good news is that, as I say, there's been a lot of development in terms of understanding the self. This person is incredibly proud, incredibly ambitious and driven, and and feels as though they're an authority. There is a good deal of confidence here. There's a good deal of self-esteem, and that's a really good sign, because if we saw a lacking of that self-esteem combined with the other things we've seen, it would be even worse in terms of um, how this person expresses themselves and finds that release. So it's just a good thing that this person has learned to work through some of the emotional and psychological damage, essentially, um, that they've received when they were young. And one of the other things that, one of the other ways we can see this, I'll just borrow his head. Look at the left hand. Now, notice the heart line. there is something of um, a wave in it. I wouldn't say it's dramatic. There's certainly, again, it's another sign of emotional instability, let's say. But compare it with the right hand. On the right hand, there isn't such a waviness going on as there is just a gentle sort of arc. And also it's longer. It reaches right up onto Jupiter itself. Whereas on the left hand, it just reaches Jupiter. Again, this shows us growth, development, healing emotionally, and an understanding of their own emotions, as well as their place in the world and how they want to help others, how they want to give back, how they want to love. So there has been again growth here, and that's how we see again the right hand shows us the external and the development, and what this is what's inherent. This is what they were provided with, and this is what they've made of it. To quote Cairo again. So it's really fortunate here. It's really a good thing. The other obvious differences I see here is that the right hand headline forks, and this is quite a marvelous thing. The left hand doesn't show us this at all. So again, we see here, uh, perspectives shifting in quite a dramatic way. And crucially, this print here has all the answers to this. So I'm going to break down here what I see in this print, and it's quite telling. And I'm going to touch on this prison time now because when we serve time, it's isolation from society, and when we see our environment, our life, and the way in which we live our life protected and boxed off in the hands, it's a sign of isolation, as is spending time in hospital, or if we are in some sort of environment where we are unable to see the rest of the world. I've seen it on the hands of someone who works on a cruise ship, someone who works in the Navy as well, a very famous psychic. So if you look here, what you can actually see is a square, and it's outside of the lifeline, and it's connected to the fate line. And this square starts to develop, and this is one of the strange things about palmistry, because here is early 20s, um, and here where this line kind of forms to meet the fate line is, much later than that. And so, what you kind of see is the way that the timing of events works in the hands is the lifeline, you run down, work towards the wrist, whereas on the fate line, you work upwards. And sometimes these events can cross over, and what you see is a repetition in time, kind of spiraling back on itself. And in some way, that goes to show how palmistry shows us how time is cyclical, how it spirals. It's a mad theory, and I don't want to get too much into it in this video. Um, but I have a habit of going off on a tangent. Before I really kind of break down this prison time here, I just want to explain the hand shape here because this is, I would say, a combination of a fire and an earth hand. And if I had to put it down into the system of 12, I'd say that this is a practical hand. Earth hands are very commonly involved in areas of martial arts. It's the most common of the elements seen in China. They're very physical and material. And there are very sort of earthy traits in his hand. I'd say he's more earth than fire, but is also a fiery element to him. And so it kind of makes him a bit of a volcano in a way, because quite literally he's both hot in the ground and explosive. And not really making much sense here. But notice how um, the lifeline is joined to the headline for quite a significant time. And this is a very earthy trait because it's showing quite a lot of cautiousness and indecision. And that's also seen by the fork in the headline. So it's known as the writer's fork, and it's showing two perspectives. There was a mental shift here, and I believe this happened at the age of 37, and I'm going to explain why. But before the head and the lifeline break away, where this person really claims their independence in life at the age of about 24 for this person, that's where they really claim their independence and really became their own person. But you notice here there's a strong link to the family. There's an incredible hurt and anger here, where the joined life and headline split and divide. And it's a threat to the life itself, a threat into the way in which this person lives their life. And this is um, late teens. So this person's life was turned dramatically upside down. Now, where the lifeline pulls apart like this at such an early age, and where we see this kind of anger as well, I mean, that's kind of irrelevant, really, but when you see this pulling apart of the lifeline, this person's it's like an explosion's gone off, an event so traumatic in their life that their whole life and the way in which they live it has been turned upside down. I've seen it in the hands of someone whose um, parent committed suicide, and this is a very similar thing here. And look, how this person dealt with it was sheer rage. That's how they dealt with it, and it's really painful to see. It's really hurtful to see as a palmer see these events and how a person's been triggered. Often we see, the hands of suspects, and actually all we see is a victim, because we see the reasons as to why and how they've reached the point in their life and the events that that turn them into criminals and suspects. At one point, every person was a victim, um, almost always anyway. At least, and this is what I see here, and this is why I think we see some of the reasons for this unhealthy release and anger. Also, notice how the Venus mount. Now, look at the lower mount of Venus. I say lower mount of Venus. What I mean is the Venus mount itself it hangs quite low, and the reason for this is it's separated by this via Mater, the mother line, as it was known in Roman palmistry. And what this does is it separates inner Mars. Inner Mars is massive because of it. This sense of motivation, drive, determination, and anger is huge. The capacity for rage is huge. Luckily, it's not, pronounced as Venus is. His constitution of vitality and his charisma as well. His personality is strong. His desire as well is strong. Um, that's not a good thing to have in conjunction with a large inner Mars mount, because it's the potential for something like committing, um, you know, uh, how can I put this? Acts out of desire combined with rage. Essentially, if we're driven to do what we want, if inner Mars is if there's too much space there, if it's too large, it can overtake if we have a strong sense of desire as well, and we're releasing unhealthily because of those um, repressed or at least past traumas that we've not quite worked through. It's not a good sign. It could lead towards very unhealthy sexual and aggressive acts of sexual aggression. This combined with actually the thumb is short. Logic, thankfully, the length of logic is slightly longer than will. So this leavens some of the things I've mentioned, which is a really good thing. But an overall short thumb, again, is not a great sign, because it means that they are acting quite quickly. There is less time to kind of process. They're very efficient in the way that they carry themselves and their personality. And it shows an extra kind of sense of enthusiasm. But because of some of the things I've already pointed out, it's not necessarily a good thing. And also with the headline forking as it does, and kind of firing into, it doesn't, thankfully, droop low into lunar, but if this headline should start to grow and reach right down into unrealistic and deep and dark thoughts of fantasy and the subconscious imagination, combine that with that desire and aggression, that possibility for sexual rage, it's not a good sign to have. So what we're seeing here is um, some ingredients for potentially very negative and unhealthy acts and potentially criminal acts. Now, what we see here is this square from the age of sort of early to mid-20s. I'd say this is maybe at the age of about 24 or so, right up to 35, something like that. We have here a very real threat towards imprisonment. And because it's the right hand, the physical implication of this, as I say, the right hand shows us what's physical and practical material. What's on the outside, the external. So if we're seeing a square here, it's showing the very real outcome of this. It's showing actually this person was in prison or hospital throughout this time, in and out of throughout this time. Now, if we saw it on the left hand only, it would show the fear of this. It would show the potential that they are, in fact, carrying out, criminal acts, or they're doing some dangerous things which could put them in hospital. If we saw it on the left hand only, it would show the fear of it. If we see it on the right hand only, then it would show us it's something more physical, potentially. Now, what I find interesting is there's a little line here, and it kind of shows you, provides you the answer as to what was going on here. So at the age of 37 here, we have this moment of incredible sort of anger. It's attached to, weirdly, it's connected to thoughts and feelings of their mother. And there's a tremendous drive at this time to succeed. You can see the fate line here is thicker, driving a harder, kind of more sluggish energy. There's a real sense of needing to succeed at this time. They're doing everything. They're working as hard as they can. Their life, every minute of it, is working towards achieving at this time. There's no time for fun. It's just all work at this time. And at this same time, you can see here this line here, it kind of cuts across the life, the head, and the fate line. And as it does, after this time, 37, I say it because where the fate line hits the headline is 35, and then a couple of years later, you can see how just this whole kind of splodge here by the negative that's created in this print as to just how hard this person's working. It looks to divide the headline. This is where at this point this person's mental shift really occurs. They have something of an epiphany. They're able to see things from more than one perspective after this time. They really change the way in which they see the world around them. They make some big decisions at this time. And it's at the age of 37 that he files for bankruptcy. And that's why we can see that the fate line after this time kind of just peters out. Got all this flurry of activity, and all of a sudden it's just sort of, oh, nothing. Um, so earlier on, I was saying how the fate line, you read it upwards. Well, here is the success line. It's naturally stemming from the lifeline, of course it is. It's because it requires life, physical force in order to create this success. You see the same thing in all athletes, martial artists, and successes in military careers as well. And notice how at the age of 18 on the fate line here, this is where really things start to take off. And it's around this time where this person really kind of begins to carve their own um, independence, as well as at this time an ambition line begins to rise from the lifeline as well. The success line is kind of neither here nor there. I mean, it's existent, but it's kind of still in its growth and development. And then at 25, it's, you know, it's aided by this, what looks like an obstruction here. There's something of a crossroads moment here, um, and success is made more possible. The roots of it really develop at this time. And again, it looks really strong. And then it kind of just, money is being made, and then it sort of peters out after this time, after we, kind of reach just past this headline. I mean, it's still strong, it's still good in these years, but not as strong as you see it here. Well, actually, such is the life of a boxer. You really only got a few good years in you. And a dancer as well. After 35, your career is pretty much over. It's the same in a lot of physically demanding careers. One of the things that really strikes me is the heart line here. You can't notice again, you've got this flurry of activity right underneath. Luckily, it's not Saturn. And really, this is potential for eye issues actually, but also artery, cardiac issues as well, which is very common in boxers. Now, I would say more so if we saw it underneath Saturn. This is more of an eye issue, especially if we were to see something of a large island here. It's hard to know really. So essentially, after filing for bankruptcy, he really kind of shifts his perspective, and his career, pretty much going nowhere for some time. Particularly, actually, notice the fate line, it stops before it hits the headline, stops altogether. And as I say, when the headline hits the fate line, this is 35. So around about here, this is about the age of 30, 31. He, something happens here which really just stops his career dead. The age of 31, he bit someone's ear in the ring, and I think he was disqualified. So there we go. He's not able to complete his path in life. Everything that he's built himself to do, he's no longer able to do for a time at least. I just feel that 37 is such a profound year for this person because he um, has this dramatic win, a knockout, and then he files for bankruptcy and he retires all in one year. So much happens, and that's why we've got such a massive amount of activity all here before it all sort of starts to peter out again. Then just a few years later, he's caught on possession and he has to spend, it's not much time in prison. But again, it's like this is why we have this shadow of a box over this whole period. It hangs over the fate line as well as the lifeline. Sometimes you'll just see it kind of, inside the headline, um, and the fate line. It's not quite kind of reaching right over, but this really, because he's in the public eye, it really has an effect on his career and what he's able to do. Sometimes you'll sit inside the lifeline, and that shows more of prevention. That shows more isolation from society rather than something like imprisonment. Um, so you could say, well, that potentially they're kind of working on a cruise ship or something like that. There's you kind of got to read between the lines a little bit. Now, often a headline that kind of ends underneath hollow, that's a very earth trait as well. That's a very kind of materially focused, um, mental kind of outlook. You can see where a person places their values because of that. Um, and what I find interesting about the sun line here, the success line, is as it kind of reaches away from the heart line here, we see greater success after the age of 53 again. Um, but and it really grows, this level of success, it grows until we see this kind of splodge right here. And although, I didn't read his hand leading up to this fateful fight that he's had very recently, I really wish I had done because I'm certain I would have predicted that he would have lost. Because this little splodge right here, all this again, this massive amount of flurry of activity. It's not productive. It's not straightforward. It's not streamlined. It's a mess. It's preventing the flow of upward energy, which is what we want to see in the hands, especially in this area of the palm. And so what this really is a massive effect on a person's reputation, on their success, their happiness, their achievement, their sense of fulfillment in life. There's almost an explosion here. And I kind of get this feeling that I, unfortunately, I can't look at the left hand with this kind of clarity. I'd really love to, because this shows again the environmental, the external, the practical, material effects of what's occurring in terms of success and achievement and happiness. Because I think I would see in the left hand that he had actually a profound belief in himself, this unwavering, um, belief that he was going to win. There was no question in his mind, and I think that's what we see with this explosion of the sunline. It just looks like it's the fireworks gone off. It looks like he's lost all of his money, all of his career's gone down the drain. That's sort of what I'm seeing here. And it's really sad, actually. Um, and that's not to say that this person is, a lot of the problems they have created themselves, but a lot of it stems from childhood, and a lot of the things that happened during, childhood were not their fault. So it's just never as black and white as, oh, well, they kind of deserve it. It's just never that straightforward. So what we have here is a real desperation to almost this sort of dogged determination to make like that, to revamp, to renew, to kickstart this career again. Yes, I can do it. I will make it. I'm going to make all this money again. He was earning a tremendous amount of money before he filed for bankruptcy, and so to have all of that, you don't know what you got till it's gone. So there's this real sense that he's doing everything he can to reignite his career in the limelight again, and it almost happened, but then it just fizzled out like a firework, and it's all over just like that. All of this effort at such an age in his life as well. It would have been tremendously difficult to get into the shape that he had before this fight. Years of work and campaigning to market himself again, reinvent himself again as a champion, as a fighter. So to see all that come to nothing, it's really, I've never quite seen this before, and I've no idea when this handprint was taken, but I think it's probably quite some time ago. But it really illustrates just how the palms show us of a view of things to come, and sometimes that view is, unless we're making great changes in the present, that view is fairly accurate. Unless we are really focusing on the present and making changes in the present, that future won't really change, or at least the view of that won't change all that much. The palms kind of say, well, if you carry on going the way you're going, this is what's going to happen. They continually say that. So are you continuing down the same path, or are you making changes? If you are, it's likely that the lines in your hands are changing as well. So again, reading between the lines a little bit here, and I am doing this now. The heart line here points towards this time, showing how strongly he feels about his own success. There's also something of an obstacle here as well, which kind of cuts down. Again, I've also mentioned um, this shifting of perspectives, the doubling of perspectives, uh, leaning into darker thoughts, imagination, unrealistic thoughts. There's a potential here to spiral into depression. And looking at his later life, so he's 58 now at the time of this reading, and on the lifeline, 58 would be somewhere around about where we see this secondary square attached to the fate line. So what we're seeing here is again the possibility for imprisonment. So I feel that now that he has really lost this fight, I think he was banking on it. I think he was betting not not just financially, but emotionally. And I think he kept his hopes so high. You know, you haven't if you don't keep your hopes up, you haven't got anything to lose. And I feel like he's lost in this respect, in more ways than one, in every respect. So he's now in danger of spiraling. He's now in danger of trying to cope by unhealthy mechanisms. And again, some of that rage might come out, some of that need, some of those desires might kind of manifest unhealthily, aggressively. So there could be the potential here for um, imprisonment again later on in his life. There could be a need to undertake some sort of criminal activities. Perhaps he dodges taxes. Who knows? But I find it really interesting that this mother line kind of points towards this. And again, it sort of highlights that all of these issues stem from a lack of emotional nutrition when young. So, for so many of us, the trauma that we receive when we're young, we carry with us throughout the rest of our lives. And how we choose to deal with it, how we acknowledge and accept, how we act on our feelings really is is everything really. And this is why palmistry is so powerful because it shows us a much deeper, greater understanding of the self. Once we know ourselves, we are much more empowered and enabled, and it provides us with that confidence. It provides us with that know-how to navigate, to understand our flaws and work on them, to know our strengths and play to them. That's why palmistry is just so vital. If you would like a palm reading, please do email me. I know it's the run up to Christmas, so I understand. I have not really been getting any readings recently. Um, so yeah, pretty broke myself. Also, the car had to go into the garage and now I've got to pay £500 because my injectors aren't working, and there was recently a massive vet bill. I think everyone's going through a similar thing, to be honest. I'm not going to whinge, but perhaps you would know someone who would like a palm reading for Christmas. Why not refer them to me? Let me know what your thoughts are on this reading, and let me know if you feel, I might have missed something here. Um, Perhaps you've seen something and you want to ask a question. Perhaps you've got your own questions around this reading. The thing I am going to leave off on is this ring of Saturn. Actually, this is a really big note to mention. Ring of Saturn is um, essentially it shows blockages, emotional blockages, a lack of emotional nutrition. Again, it's everything actually I've already mentioned, and the reasons for those are the reasons for this ring of Saturn, and it shows essentially a person receives misfortune because of their own poor choices, decision making, and it's these decisions are rooted in this person's early life trauma, their feelings around their mother, particularly. Um, it's a real shame because if he was loved by a female maternal figure when he was very young, from the age of up to 6 years old, a lot of his problems would be non-existent. And it just goes to show how vital parental guidance is, how vital love is, particularly when we are in those crucial years of development. The ring of Saturn here shows dramatic misfortune because of really poor decision making. He's the result of his own failures. He is stunted in his own ability to pursue his destiny, his what he feels his purpose in life. There's a blockage here, horizontal lines of blockages. This is ringing off. This is cordoning off. There's a barrier, a blockade, um, almost a semicircular fence around his um, finger of destiny, time, the inevitable, planning, duty. There's an inability to carry out his own purpose in life, and that's really sad. The ring of Saturn is probably one of the most unfortunate things you'll see in a person's palm. And when people hear of Mike Tyson, at least before this big fight that occurred recently, he's in the Hall of Fame. He's a legendary heavyweight champion, but not anymore. It seems he'll probably be remembered for trying to reignite his career and failing miserably. And that, unfortunately, if he had ended on a good note and just continued to make cameo after cameo in movies, in voice animation and things like that, writing even, he has this writer's fork, coaching, um, working towards providing and giving back to the wider community. He really would have gone down as an icon, a legend, despite his many failings, his aggressive behavior, the rape conviction, filing for bankruptcy, you know, hitting a couple of elderly people as he did once, hitting his wife allegedly, hitting a referee in the ring. Despite all of these stupid and beyond that awful things, he probably still would have gone down as a legend. He would have ended on a good note, on a high. People would have remembered him for his successes and not his failures. Now, people are going to remember him for his failures. And that's what we see here. So I do think he's going to spiral, and I think he's going to end up back in prison. And I don't think it'll be long before that happens as well. So there we are. That's my. Oh, and here we've got this event here from Pluto that's just looking to kind of say peekaboo. This is an event outside of his control. As I say, he's going to spiral. Something is going to happen, and then it's not going to take much. An unforeseen event is going to occur after this time in prison. Anyway, that's as far as I'm going to go with this. I'm not going to say too much. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm looking forward to actually hearing what you have got to say about this reading. Let me know if you've learned anything. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know who you'd like me to read the hands of for next Sunday's reading. Let me know if you'd like me to read your hands. Please do book through my website. Please do like this video and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.